Hey everybody, how's it going? Hopefully y'all are having a great day. In today's video, I want to discuss, in my opinion, what the first 7 steps should be when you're starting out your financial journey. Now, while this video is made for those who are starting out, even if you have a few years under the belt, hopefully these tips will still be applicable and useful to you. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First up, you should document all of the spending that you anticipate that you'll be doing month to month. Now, when you're first starting out, this can be a bit intimidating or a little bit mysterious because you don't quite know what you're going to be spending. So here are a few basic categories to get you started. And as you go on and as you experience things, you'll be able to add more to this category or adjust some of your expectations accordingly. Some things that I would definitely include are your living expenses as far as rent is concerned. I would document at least a good budget for groceries. I would also document utilities, gas, electric, sewer, if that's the case for you. Those are just a few things to get you started. And don't get me wrong, you're going to have a lot more categories to write down, but you'll experience those as time goes on. Also, you want to document what you would consider a financially fun life for you to be living. Document the costs. Identify your hobbies, identify things that actually matter to you, and try and keep this category to maybe 1 to 3 different items. Some examples of this in my life are gaming and personal health and fitness. It's important to identify these things early to help stave off this concept of lifestyle creep, which I covered in another video, which I'll link down below. The important thing to note about this category is that it should not be your goal to spend every single dollar at this point. Ideally, you want to be targeting for things that you account for in this category to hit roughly about 50% of the money that you're going to be taking home on a month-to-month basis. Step 2 would be to document all of the debts that you have and come up with a payment plan and stick to it. Now, what do I mean by a payment plan? There's really one of 2 ways that you can go about this. You can either set yourself a hard and fast timeline in which you're going to pay off all these debts, let's say 5 years or 10 years or something like that, and divide that by the total amount of debt that you have to figure out how much you need to put towards that debt any given year. And then once you get that yearly amount, you divide it by 12 to figure out how much you need to put away per month. Now, I'm personally a fan of option number 1 because it puts a hard deadline on when you're going to pay things off by and forces you to be a little bit uncomfortable to get that debt paid in a timely manner. Option 2 would be to pick an amount that you're able to manage on a month-to-month basis and put that towards your debt. You multiply that out by 12 to get how much you would put towards your debt in any given year. And then you could figure out how many years it's going to take you to pay off that debt. Now, again, I personally prefer option number 1 because it does hold you accountable to a certain timeline. Option 2 can kind of lend itself to sometimes happening, sometimes not. It kind of puts a lackadaisical schedule on something as important as paying off debt. But most importantly, stick to it. Do not change the timeline. Do not extend it. Do everything in your power to hold yourself accountable to paying off these debts. Now, the only time that I can say you can change is if you're paying the debts off more aggressively and you plan to shorten the time horizon, but we try not to extend it. Right? We need to hold ourselves accountable to paying off these debts so that we can live a financially free life. Step 3, and I'm sure you have all heard this, that is to establish an emergency fund. Now, everyone says this, but let's break down a little bit about what I think an emergency fund is and how I think it should serve you. When I think of an emergency fund, I think of something that serves 2 purposes. One, which is the more extreme purpose, is in case I get laid off or my company goes under, or for some reason I don't have any more income. This will serve as supplemental income until I'm able to find another job and secure another salary. Depending on who you talk to and depending on your current situation, the amount of months worth of living expenses you should have saved up will vary from person to person. If you are a single individual and your salary is your sole source of income, they recommend you to have right around 7 to 8 months worth of living expenses. Now, if you're in a joint financial relationship, this 8 months can probably drop down to about 4 to 6 months. Now, the second part about an emergency fund, which is also equally important, is to cover unexpected life events. Now, while yes, losing your job and subsequently your source of income is an unexpected life event, more realistically, what we see constitute emergencies are mechanical problems with your car that you need to fix right away. This could be bodily injury leading to hospitalization. These emergencies are probably more realistic and I think more readily available to inconvenience us throughout life. Given these 2 purposes for an emergency fund, how I personally do my emergency fund, and this is all subjective to me, do what works for you and do your own research. But what I like to do is calculate what a true unexpected situation outside of losing my job calculate what that dollar value actually looks like, right? What does an actual mechanical problem with my car look like? What does that cost, right? If I were to get an injury and I needed to get a broken bone fixed and casted, what does that cost look like? And whatever the worst case scenario for, a reasonable cost, I keep that aside as cash. Now, I keep that invested in a money market fund, which if you have questions about what that is, I'm happy to explain that if you ask down in the comment section, or if it's requested enough, I'll make a video on what a money market fund is, but I imagine it would be a short video. I keep that immediate emergency dollar value in a money market fund, or basically cash, so that it's always ready for me to use if the situation comes up. Now, the other portion of my emergency fund, which arguably would cover the period in which I'm unemployed, I like to have that invested. Now, what you choose to do with that investment is up to you. It's up to your investment discretion. Everybody's risk tolerances are going to be different. Full candid, me personally, I put the other portion of my emergency fund in Microsoft. This is solely subjective. This is not investment advice. I'm not saying go take half of your emergency fund and put it in Microsoft. But for me, for my risk appetite, the job security that I had around the type of job that I do, I felt that that was a safe enough time horizon, along with a good level of risk in investing with Microsoft. And it has fortunately paid off for me. Not to say that it will for you, not to say that it will for me in the future either. This is just what I personally did. This isn't a video on what to invest in. This is more of just explaining how I personally think of my emergency fund and how I did it myself. Again, the end goal with this emergency fund is anything that would constitute an emergency, short of me actually losing my job, I have available in cash ready to go. Now, why is this important? When you are in the first part of your financial journey and you're setting all of these things up, you are going to be very strapped for cash. If something like that were to come up and you did not have access to cash immediately available to cover that expense, what is the first thing that you're going to do to cover it? Probably going to put it on a credit card. And this starts a vicious cycle of consumer debt and financing. There's a wonderful YouTube channel that I've started watching lately. His name is Caleb Hammer. I will link him down below. He goes through and discusses more dire situations in financial audit. Watch that and you'll understand exactly what I mean, how one consumer debt, one consumer swipe of a credit card during an emergency fund can really spiral out of control and lead to massive amounts of debt. This emergency fund helps combat that. In times where you are safe, you are secure, you have income, you should start preparing for the unexpected events. Someone once told me the wrong time to start thinking about car insurance is after you get into an accident. In a similar way, the time you want to start thinking about saving up for an emergency fund should not be when an emergency happens. Now, I personally would do steps 2 and 3 simultaneously. Because step 3 is a preventative measure for you incurring more debt while you're trying to pay off your existing debt, I think it's important to do both at once, right? If you put all of your money into paying off your debt and an emergency did happen, you would ultimately have to swipe a credit card or incur more debt to help cover the cost. How much you put to one versus the other, I think warrants a more deeper conversation and a deeper dive into that specific situation. Generally speaking, I would probably do steps 2 and 3 simultaneously. With step 4, we're going to be opening some brokerage accounts. Now you might be asking, what's a brokerage account? Well, I'm here to tell you. I'll start by explaining an account that you're probably already familiar with, and that is a bank account. Now, a bank account is an account that you have with a bank. Banks are holders and lenders of cash, but a brokerage account is an account that you open with a brokerage firm. So now that we got that explanation out of the way, the next question you might have is, okay, well, who or what are brokerage firms? Well, great question. Much like for banks, you have Bank of America, Wells Fargo, you will have major players in the brokerage space, that being Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard. Largely who you choose to do business with is personal preference. I personally use Schwab. I find that their user interface is pretty friendly and I like their online platform, so I ended up going with them. It also helps that my first job, we used Schwab for our clients, so I just ended up opening a Schwab account because it was convenient and I knew the platform. Once you decide which brokerage firm you want to work with, now it comes time to open the accounts. The first account is going to be a Roth IRA. The Roth IRA is a powerful vehicle for compounding wealth and for saving for retirement. Next up, you'll want to open 4, potentially 5 individual accounts. When you're on the brokerage firm's website and you click their open an account button, you'll be able to select an individual account. The first of these 4, potentially 5 individual accounts that you're going to open, we're going to call our bill pay account. This account is going to be responsible for paying for the first 3 categories of spending, which if you have not watched my video on budgeting, you should go check that out. it'll make a lot more sense. Our goal here is to separate the money that is reserved or earmarked for our first 3 categories of spending. The second individual account that you're going to be opening, we're going to title this our emergency fund account. This account is not to be touched, right? Only in instances of emergency, as the account indicates. The reason we are doing this is to help separate our finances into these different buckets so that we don't risk overspending and potentially cutting into some funds that are not meant to be used. The third account that we're going to open, we're going to be calling this one long-term investing. The purpose of this long-term investing account, basically just set money aside and invest and have that grow for a very long time, right? We're not going to be touching this money at all. This is not to be used for an emergency or anything, right? You should do all you can to avoid spending money from this account. From a timeline perspective, the investments in this account really should stay invested for at least the next 15 to 20 years minimum. Account number 4 that you're going to be opening, we will be calling this one goals-based saving. Now, the purpose of this account is to bucket off some money that you plan to save for short-term goals. The types of goals that we're going to be saving for in these accounts have a very short time horizon, typically 1 to 3 years, right? This could be saving for a trip, or if we're going off of the fun lifestyle that we defined in step 1, it would be, for me, saving to build a new computer in the next 3 years, or saving for an exercise bike, or saving for some other fitness related thing. Money you set in this account should be treated very similarly to the first half of the emergency fund. This should really only be cash. Or cash equivalent. The purpose of this is to not lose value, right? We're not trying to invest this and gain more. We're just trying to not lose as much to inflation or run the risk of investing it and potentially losing value by the time we actually need the funds. And the optional 5th account, and this is one that I personally have just opened recently and probably didn't have a need for within the first, call it maybe 6 years of my investing life or my financial life, is an intermediate term investing account. This intermediate term investment account is kind of an in-between point of our short-term goals-based savings account and our long-term investing account. The time horizon of the investments within this account would typically be about 5 to 10, maybe even 15 years. Saving that we do in this account can typically be used for things, right? So if you're trying to save up for a down payment on a house or any type of other major purchase, that can be done in this account. Now, the reason why the intermediate term is so important is that we can actually stand to do a bit of investing with our time horizon on this. So it doesn't need to be just saving cash for whatever that big purchase may be. The idea is that any cash or any goals that you would have that have a little bit of a longer time horizon so you actually need it, those go in this account. It can stand a little bit of market risk. So I would say maybe a passive ETF like SPY or any other total market ETF would be pretty good for you. Which brings us perfectly to step number 5, and that is to get some money invested. Now, when you're thinking about getting this money invested, I don't want you to overcomplicate it. I'm not telling you to go out and do individual research on a variety of different companies. Fun fact, there is an inverse correlation to the amount of trading activity and long-term performance. Basically meaning people who trade more actively statistically are shown to have less return than those who just passively index and let it sit, which further means the more easy you make it for yourself and the less amount of trading you do, you're actually statistically proven to do better in the markets. That's fantastic. The S&P 500 ETF that I personally use is SPY, and that if you Google search SPY ETF, that's the one that I personally use. Buying this ETF is actually pretty easy. I know it can kind of seem intimidating at first, but all you have to do is log into the brokerage firm that you chose. You want to log into their website. Typically, there's some kind of trade button or something like that. You click that, you select the account that you want to make the trade in. You type in SPY or whatever ETF you choose, click buy, and you put in the dollar amount that you want to buy, and you click submit. Now you're invested. Congratulations. Next up is step number 6. Now, I personally wouldn't start step number 6 until steps 1 through 5 has started to kind of become automatic, right? You'll kind of notice a point where you don't have to start thinking about these things anymore. Steps 1 through 5 kind of just take care of themselves. At that point, you'll want to start investing in yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? Investments that you make in yourself are going to yield fantastic results long-term. And not all of those results are monetary. You'll want to spend money on things that you feel add value to your life or add value to your career or anything really in between. Some examples of investing in myself that I've done personally throughout my life are books of all different kinds of topics, honestly. Some about psychology, some about personal finance, some about chess, some about cooking, really any type of book. It's all fun to me, and I've started to really develop an enjoyment of learning through reading. Another area of investing in myself actually really doesn't even have to do anything with me. It's investing my time in helping others, whether it's through this YouTube channel or through personally helping my close friends and family with their personal finances. I find a lot of joy in it. It's my way to give back, and it's something that brings me a lot of fulfillment in my life. Find whatever investment in yourself works for you and makes you happy. Whether it's something you outlined in step 1 or it's something new that you outlined down here that brings you a sense of fulfillment, some type of emotional investment, I recommend you do it. And that brings us to step 7, which is to commit yourself to learning how money affects you. Now, step 7 is a lifelong pursuit. It's something that I'm currently going on right now, and I don't anticipate myself to not be on this journey probably until the day that I die. Whether it's learning from reading books, or whether it's learning from talking with others, or even learning from having critical conversations with yourself, it is very important to understand how you emotionally react with money and the circumstances and instances that happen as a result of money in your life. An example of this in my life that I'm currently going through is investments, especially within an economic time such as the one we're in right now. It's wild. I've only been investing for a little bit, but the amount of volatility, the amount of uncertainty is something I've never seen before in my short investing life. I'm taking time to deeply analyze how all of this is making me feel. What kind of pressures do I get on a day-to-day basis? Do I feel insecure about my current financial situation? What events would have to happen to make me feel worse? What events would have to happen to make me feel better? All of these are fantastic questions to be asking yourself throughout your financial life. I think if you give yourself wholly to step number 7, you're gonna have a very good and successful financial life. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found these steps helpful. If this is something that you're currently able to use, I would love to know what step you're at, where you found some struggles, where you found some successes. Leave them all in the comment section. I get to every single comment, and I'd be excited to hear from you. But without anything else to say, I hope you all have a wonderful day.